Thank you, Kai. I want to suggest that if we're serious about improving education, we have to stop people doing good things. I'll explain why I think that, hopefully within the next half an hour. Raising achievement matters. It matters for individuals and for society. For individuals, you get more money. If you have a degree in Germany, you earn 4% more. In America, it's 7% for males and 10% for females. In the United Kingdom, it's 13%. You'll be healthier. The OECD asked people, are you in good health? People who had left school at 16, 66% said yes. People who'd finished A-levels, 76% said yes. People who'd gone on to do a degree, 86% said they were in good health. You'll be healthier, and you will also live longer. Now, doing that research takes quite a while. I'm glad to see that some of you are awake this morning. Yes, you have to wait for people to die before you can estimate the impact of education on longevity. But the current estimates we have are that 1 year of education adds 1.7 years to life. It also matters to individuals. You have lower criminal justice costs for society, for lower criminal justice costs, lower healthcare costs, and increased economic growth. A recent OECD report estimated that if we could close the gap between our performance and Finland's performance on PISA, the Programme on International Student Assessment, by 25 points, halfway, the net present value to the UK economy would be £4 trillion. That is 3 times the cumulative national deficit, or another way to think about it, it's roughly the value of everything in Britain right now. These are high stakes. But we also need to understand that the world of work is changing in surprising ways. Which of the following categories of skill do you think has disappeared from the workplace most rapidly? Is it 1, routine manual? Is it 2, non-routine manual? Is it 3, routine cognitive? 4, complex communication? Or 5, expert thinking and problem solving? Can I ask you to vote by holding up the appropriate number of fingers? Which of those 5 categories of skill do you think has disappeared most rapidly? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Thank you. Most of you, like me, assumed it must be 1. We hear about jobs being outsourced all the time. It's not. There's been a 14% rise in expert thinking and in complex communication, an 8% rise in expert thinking and problem solving. The fastest declining skill of all is routine cognitive. Why? Because although some jobs have been outsourced, more have been automated. Basically, computers are simpler than robots, and therefore we've been able to get rid of low-skill cognitive jobs more quickly than we've been able to get rid of routine manual jobs. The scary thing is this means that no qualification jobs are disappearing rather rapidly. At the beginning of 2002, there were roughly 3 million no qualification jobs in the UK economy. And by the end of 2008, there were only about 2 million. What this means is that in the UK economy, over the last 8 years, we have shedded 400 no qualification jobs every single day. Now, as Bob Geldof said last night, we still make things in Britain. Britain is still the 6th largest manufacturer in the world. We were recently overtaken by Italy. They were very pleased about that. They gave it a special name. They called it Il Sorpasso, the overtaking. But we are still the 6th largest manufacturer in the world. We still make things. We just don't use so many human beings to do so. Back in 1978, about 7 million people were employed in manufacturing. Now, it's less than half of that. We are still the 6th largest manufacturer in the world, but whereas 20, 30, 40 years ago, you would have gone into a factory and seen 20 or 30 men working at milling machines and lathes, now there's one person programming 30 computer numerically controlled lathes. What this has resulted in is an extraordinary change in the rewards to skill. If you have a postgraduate qualification, in real terms in America, you will earn 28% more as a premium on your salary than you would have done in 1973. If you have a bachelor's degree, it's 20% more. The scariest thing of all is what's happened to high school dropouts, those people who leave school at 16. They have suffered a 16% real terms pay cut in the United States. That's really quite extraordinary when you think about it. If you're living in America today as a high school dropout, you are worse off in real terms than you would have been in 1978. Now, governments understand this. Governments know that we need to raise educational achievement. It's a national priority. It's not just good, it's vital for our future economic prosperity. So they've tried lots of things. There's a widespread belief that private schools are good, but controlling for social class, students in the UK taught in classes of 13 in private schools learn the same as students taught in as classes of 25 in state schools. Private schools, the quality of teaching appears to be rather lower than in state schools. Second, charter schools. Letting schools free. In America, 17% of charter schools were better than the schools they replaced. Unfortunately, 37% were worse. So the net effect of introducing charter schools in the United States is slightly to lower educational achievement. National strategies. The national rollout of the national literacy and numeracy strategies in primary school resulted in a cost of £500 million and a net impact of one extra kid achieving level 4 per primary school per year. I worked it out, it would have been cheaper just to bung each of these kids £1,000 to pass the test. Interactive whiteboards. Doubling the number of interactive whiteboards in London as part of London Challenge produced no increase in student achievement. Now, all these look like smart things to do. They look like reasonable things to do. And so the question I have is, why do smart people do dumb things? I've never met a stupid politician. They're all incredibly intelligent. They really are. And I realized that for many years, of course, we were looking in the wrong place for solutions. So I call this the 3 generations of school effectiveness research. So back in the 1970s, people realized that some schools get good results, some schools get less good results. I know, let's get more schools like the good ones. Sounds like a plan, doesn't it? So there's a search for the characteristics of effective schools. And I can distill that down to 3 things. If you want to improve your results, you have to do 3 things. 1, get rid of the boys. In every developed country now, girls are outperforming boys, so the more girls you've got in your school, the better you are going to look. Second, apparently become a Catholic school. But thirdly, and most importantly, move your school into a nice, leafy, suburban area. That will have more impact than everything else. You'll get nicer kids, you'll get more supportive parents, and you'll get parents who will pay for private tutors. There are some schools in London where 50% of the students have a private tutor. Who gets the credit? The school. Now, as the second generation of school effectiveness pointed out, demographics accounts for most of these differences. It turns out that if you look at the differences in kids' results between schools, the school effect accounts for 7% of the difference. The 93% of the differences in school performance are nothing to do with the school, it's to do with the kids going to that school. And so these people say, Basil Bernstein in the 1970s said, education cannot compensate for society, the idea that schools don't make a difference. And in one sense, they're right. Because if you had 15 students in a class getting 5 A stars to C's in the so-called average school, in a so-called good school, only 17 would, and in a so-called bad school, 13 would. Now, these are important differences, but I think they're much smaller than most people imagine. If you saw the TV program about the Birmingham school choice issues, parents were thinking, if I get my kid into the right school, they'll be set fair for life. And if I fail, they'll be blighted forever. And it just isn't so. As long as you go to school, and that's quite important, it doesn't matter very much which school you go to. But it does matter which teachers you get in that school. School-level differences in value added are small. Teacher-level differences in value added are huge. So the conclusion is that a school is effective when it's full of effective teachers. And that is quite a difficult thing to get our heads around. For many years, we've treated teachers as a commodity. We've pretended that all teachers are equally good. Now, I understand the teacher unions have done this because for solidarity, you want to keep everybody together. And more importantly, performance-related pay is actually impossible to do in principle. If we tested kids every year, gave them a test at the end of year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10, and year 11, and in maths we find that they made the biggest jump in year 9, Would we give the Year 9 teacher a bonus? Well, maybe. But that teacher might not be very good. The reason those kids did very well might be because the teacher who taught those kids in Year 8 spent a lot of time on problem solving, on collaborative learning, on resilience, on group problem solving skills. And because they spent so much time on that, the kids didn't do very well in the Year 8 test, but are now doing very well in Year 9, even though they have a useless teacher. So performance-related pay is impossible to do in principle. It also doesn't work. Research from Tennessee suggests that giving teachers $10,000 extra just for being a good teacher doesn't make the results go up. And I don't know why they were surprised by that. I mean, every teacher I've ever met is working as hard as they can. It's quite a perverse idea, really, isn't it? Well, I have this secret method of teaching fractions, but I'm not going to use it until you pay me more. Of course, the Americans don't call it performance-rated pay, they call it differentiated compensation. And that made me think, actually, we have differentiated compensation here too. We pay teachers not for getting better, but for getting older. Can I have an increment this year? Have you got any better as a teacher? No, but I've had a birthday. Cha-ching! Politicians also like the idea that all teachers are equally good because it keeps the thing simple. We just have a bar. We want a well-qualified teacher in every classroom. I don't. I want a good teacher in every classroom. It's not the same thing. But it has resulted in the pursuit of policies with a very poor benefit-to-cost ratio. People like class size reduction, and I want to make it absolutely clear. People often accuse me of saying class size reduction doesn't work. That's not true. If any one of you is teaching a smaller class, you'll get better results. That's not the issue. The issue is this. We could actually raise student achievement by the equivalent of 4 months learning per year if we could actually reduce class size and replace teachers with equally good ones. It would cost us £20,000 per classroom per year. We'd have to build an extra 150,000 classrooms. But the more problematic one is replacing you. It's going to create new jobs. We would need an extra 150,000 teachers. And if they're as good as you, we will get that extra effect. But they won't be, because the reason we chose you rather than anybody else is because you're better than the people we rejected. If we added 150,000 weak teachers to the profession in order to reduce class size, we could reduce student learning by 5 months a year. So we could spend an extra £5 billion and lower student achievement. Talk about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. We're only beginning recently to understand exactly how much a difference teachers make. Take a group of 50 teachers. If you are taught by the best teacher in that group of 50, you will learn in 6 months what kids taught by the average teacher will take a year to learn, and those taught by the least effective teacher in that group of 50 will take 2 years to achieve the same learning. There's a 4-fold difference between the most effective and the least effective teachers. And in the classrooms of the best teachers, children from disadvantaged backgrounds learn just as much as those from advantaged backgrounds. Those with behavioral difficulties learn as much as those without behavioral difficulties. So Basil Bernstein was wrong. Education can compensate for society, provided it's of very high quality. Teachers make such a difference that a recent study from Harvard found that you could detect the impact of having had an outstanding reception teacher in the average annual salaries of 35-year-olds. They found that 35-year-olds who'd had an outstanding teacher when they were 5 were earning $1,000 more per year. And they used that to work out what is the annual economic contribution of an outstanding reception teacher. They worked out it's £200,000 per year. That is the economic value created by an outstanding teacher. So, if teacher quality appears to be the single most important issue, we have two ways to go about doing it. We can either replace existing teachers with better ones, or improve the effectiveness of existing teachers. Now, the problem is with choosing different people to be teachers is that we know that teachers make a difference, but we don't know what makes the difference in teachers. We know that having advanced content matter knowledge makes no difference at all in the speed of learning, nor does having a master's degree. We know that experience has a very small effect. So 10 years of experience results in an extra 2 weeks learning per year. If you're taught by a 10-year veteran rather than a novice teacher, you will actually learn 2 weeks more every year. That's all. If the teacher has lots of knowledge of the subject at the level they're teaching it, you'll get an extra 4 weeks learning per year. These are important effects, but they're not very great. Another big idea is getting rid of incompetent teachers. Chris Woodhead famously estimated there were 15,000 of them. And I don't think it's a good idea to have incompetent teachers. Let me make that clear. But we need to understand how much of a difference getting rid of them would make. If we could get rid of these 15,000 so-called incompetent teachers and replace them with average teachers, the net impact nationally would be 1/40th of 1 grade per subject at GCSE. Raising the bar for entry into the profession so we no longer recruit the lowest performing 30% of teachers would result in an increase of 1 grade per subject at GCSE by 2030. We haven't got that much time. So we have to make the teachers we have better, what I call the love the one you're with strategy. It can be done, provided we focus rigorously on the things that need to be done, even when they're hard to do. I characterize our existing policy as a bit like the drunk who's looking for his keys underneath a street lamp, and somebody says to him, "Is this where you dropped your keys?" He says, "No, but this is where the light is." We've been doing the things that are easy to do and they haven't worked. It's time to start doing the things that will work, even though they're hard. Now, when governments heard that the work that Paul Black and I had done on formative assessment meant that students learned more, they jumped on the bandwagon very rapidly. I call it the formative assessment hijack. This has led to a whole range of practices that describe itself as AFL, but in fact is nothing like what Paul Black and I said needed to go on. So we have the long cycle stuff. Now, in many secondary schools, this has resulted in the oracle of the spreadsheet. In every school, in a secondary school now, there is the spreadsheet. This is the oracle, which is all-powerful. It is usually attended by a deputy head who feeds this oracle with data. And every so often it spurts out information about which students are going to pass and fail their GCSEs next summer. It doesn't tell you what to do about it, but at least your impending failure comes with plenty of advance warning. The medium cycle stuff is almost as bad. I was in a school the other day and the head teacher said, "Did I want to see an AFL lesson?" Which puzzled me because I thought that AFL should be a part of all lessons. But in this school, an AFL lesson is when the teacher goes around asking every single student, "What level are you at?" And one kid says, "I'm level 4. Kid next, level 5. And I realized what Paul Black and I said back in 1988 was, children need to know where they are in their learning, where they're going, how to get there. I asked this little boy, I said, "Where are you in your learning?" He said, "I'm level 4. I said, "Where do you need to get to?" He said, "I need to be level 5. I said, "How are you going to get there?" He said, "I'm going to pay more attention in class and do my homework." The problem is, what the research shows is that the stuff that makes a difference is the minute-by-minute and day-by-day stuff that teachers do in classrooms while they're teaching. And that's very hard to change. It's very easy to change things like procedures and policies or have teachers meeting outside school or outside school time to talk about data. But it's very hard to change the practices of teachers in classrooms. And I think that if we're serious about improving student achievement, we have to help teachers develop what they do in classrooms. It's hard, but it's the only thing that has a substantial impact on student achievement. The model I use, I call content then process. Some people advocate professional learning communities as the answer. Well, it's a good answer for some things, but it's an absolutely stupid answer for other things. If you wanted to increase teacher content knowledge, professional learning communities are a really stupid way to do it. You'd be much better off just teaching them the stuff. So what I'm saying is you shouldn't decide the means of achieving something until you're clear about what you want to do. As Abraham Maslow once said, he who is good with a hammer tends to think that everything is a nail. So I call the model content then process. The content of teacher learning should be what the research shows makes the biggest difference to students. And the evidence is pretty clear, it is formative assessment. Ideas to get the teachers started, so the teachers have real practical advice about what to try in their classrooms. And then the process of teacher change, which I think we haven't understood well enough. And I think there are 4 components that if any one of them is missing, you will have less effective change. The first is choice. Back in 1980, a man called Meredith Belbin wrote a book called Management Teams, Why They Succeed or Fail. And what he pointed out was that when groups work on problems in teams, there are basically 8 roles that need to be discharged for the team to be successful. And if those people present can faithfully discharge those roles, then the team is likely to succeed. But if they can't, then the team is likely to fail because people can't sustain out-of-role behavior for very long, especially under stress. And the other point he made was that each role has strengths and allowable weaknesses. And this has led in business to what is called strengths-based professional development. We haven't learned this in education yet. I did an appraisal last year, and I did a questionnaire, and I got a feedback, and one side of the page was called strengths, and the other page was called areas for development. What a load of rubbish. I'm 55. I'm not going to change. Deal with it. The aim of professional development in teaching is not to make every single teacher into a clone of every other teacher. Teachers are at their best when they are themselves. So every teacher's path to improvement will be different. We have to give teachers choice, not to be nice to them, but because without it, we won't help them become the truly outstanding practitioners that almost everybody currently working in schools can be. Flexibility. There are 2 opposing factors in any school reform. You have to allow enough flexibility so that teachers can morph their ideas and make them fit their own classrooms, but the danger is they change them so much that you get a lot of lethal mutations, where people actually change them so they no longer work. So you have to have a very clearly articulated theory of action. And what's very interesting in policymaking is that there are rarely a clearly articulated theory of action. So, for example, one of the strange pieces of policy we saw recently was this idea of there are too many obese children, so we're going to teach cooking in schools. Think that through for a minute. Do you know many thin chefs? Because I don't. So there are strategies that teachers can use at the broad level, like giving feedback that moves learning forward. But they always need to be translated into techniques that each individual teacher needs to use in their own classroom. So what I suggest is that we have a broad theory of action that talks about strategies, but how the teacher translates that into action in their own classroom is up to them. The important thing is they see these techniques as being relevant, feasible, and acceptable, and more importantly, from the theory point of view, is that they are embodying what we know about how learning takes place. So, for example, in formative assessment, we'd have some techniques like sharing exemplars, mini whiteboards. A nice technique I saw a teacher called Charlotte Kerrigan using recently to make the kids read the comments on the essays she wrote. She wrote them on strips of paper rather than at the bottom of the kids' work, and each group of 4 kids got back their 4 essays and the 4 strips of paper, and they had to match the comments to the essays. Students owning their own learning by signaling with coloured cups and a pre-flight checklist for getting students to help each other. Now, these techniques are very powerful, but we also have to understand that teachers take a long time to change. There are some jokes around about how difficult teachers find change. You know the old light bulb jokes like, how many psychoanalysts does it take to change a light bulb? 1, but the bulb has got to want to change. How many teachers does it take to change a light bulb? Change? But teachers are not resistant to change. Teachers find it hard to change because they're already experts in what they do. Teachers have done what they do hundreds, thousands, and sometimes even hundreds of thousands of times. By the time you're teaching 20 years, you'll probably asked 500,000 questions in your classroom. Doing it any other way is very hard. So we need to understand that teachers have expertise. And changing expertise is slow because to get better at something, you become less expert. You become inexpert for a little while, and most teachers find that very difficult. The danger is if they move too fast, they move away from their expertise and they get worse. One teacher described changing her teaching as a bit like engine repair in flight. And I think that's a very good description of how it feels to be trying to change your practice as a teacher. Now, expertise in teaching is complex and it's difficult to spot. And this is nicely illustrated by a study of expertise in a very simple area, basically CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. This research team prepared 6 video clips of people doing CPR. 5 of them were of students doing CPR who were just learning how to do it, and 1 was of an experienced paramedic who'd been doing it for 25 years. So people were shown these 6 video clips, and they were asked, who would you want doing CPR on you if you needed it? The experts picked the expert 90% of the time. The students picked the expert 50% of the time. The instructors, the people who teach other people how to do CPR, picked the expert 30% of the time. Why? Because the instructors were looking for people who enacted the rules of CPR that they taught. But what is interesting about this is that experts could spot other experts. It wasn't a matter of each expert having their own idiosyncratic way of doing this. Experts could see expertise, even though it couldn't be reduced to the rules that instructors taught. And that's where we, in my view, have been going wrong for the last 25, 30 years. Our professional development has been predicated on an assumption that teachers don't know stuff. So we herd teachers into rooms like this and have experts like me rectify the knowledge deficits, and we assume that now they have had these gaps in their knowledge fixed, they will go away and be better teachers. And we're then disappointed that it doesn't work. The problem is, we need to help teachers develop new habits and change habits, not adding knowledge. We have a lot to learn from Weight Watchers. Weight Watchers ought to be the least successful organization on the planet, because everyone who wants to lose weight knows what to do. Eat less, exercise more. That's it. There isn't anything else. There isn't a third secret you get told by paying your money to Weight Watchers, that if you stir your cornflakes anti-clockwise, it'll convert all the dextrose into left-handed sugar molecules that are no longer absorbed by your body. I'm sorry, it's just eat less and exercise more. But what Weight Watchers have realized is that they're not in the knowledge-giving business, they're in the habit-changing business. And we, if we're serious about learning, need to get into the habit-changing business too. It doesn't happen automatically. We know this. The most experienced teachers are not the most productive. And this is where it gets very difficult. Because we have to get over to all teachers that they are failing. Every teacher I know fails on a daily basis. We have these such high aspirations for what our children can achieve. We teach these brilliant lessons. We take in their exercise books. We look at what they wrote, and we wonder what planet they were on when we were teaching this stuff, don't we? Our daily experience as teachers is a failure. You show me a teacher who does not believe that she's failing on a daily basis, and I will show you a teacher with low expectations of her students. Our daily experience of teaching is a failure, which is what makes it the best job in the world. Because you never get any good at it. At one time, Andre Previn was the highest paid film score composer in Hollywood, and one day he walked into his office and he quit. And somebody said, "Why do you quit this amazing job?" And he said, "I wasn't scared anymore." Every day he was going into his office knowing his job held no more challenges for him. This is not something you are ever going to have to worry about. This job of teaching is so hard that one lifetime isn't enough to master it. And so that's why we need to focus on teachers getting better. Not because they're not good enough, but because they can be even better. Basically, every teacher needs to improve until they retire or die. Because if they don't, it becomes a mental health issue for teachers. You see, if you don't believe you can be a better teacher tomorrow than you were today, then in the face of your inevitable failures, because this job is so difficult, what will you do? You will start blaming the students. What can you expect from these kids? So the most important thing for teachers' mental health is to believe that you can come back tomorrow and be a better teacher. We need to create time and space for teachers to reflect in a structured way and to learn from mistakes. Esther Dyson points out there's no excuse for making the same mistake over and over again, but there's also no excuse for not making any mistakes at all. Her motto is, always make new mistakes. But I think it was best summed up by Samuel Beckett in a book called Worsted Hoe, who said, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And I think that should be our motto as teachers. Now, nobody's got this right. Nobody has cracked this business of habit change. In teaching, we can't even agree about whether something like having a seating plan is a good idea. At least in hospitals, they agree that doctors should wash their hands. I mean, do you think doctors would agree that they need to wash their hands after contact with patients? Do you think they would agree that in a neonatal intensive care unit, for example? I'm sure that most of you would say yes, which is why it's rather depressing that in one study by Larson et al., the average compliance rate in one hospital was 29% in a neonatal intensive care unit. Do you think any of those people don't think it's important? No. It's very hard to change habits. And this is why this man here, Pareto, is so important. He was interested in the design of taxation systems. And he called a Pareto improvement anything which involves making one person better off without making anyone else worse off. And in business now, it's called Pareto analysis. It's looking at how much you're expending in terms of effort versus how much you're getting. The point that Pareto made is this. You have to, by and large, stop people doing good things to give them time to do even better things. Many heads, many leaders in schools, many ministers think that the way we can improve our schools is to get rid of waste, is to stop people doing unproductive things. Well, if you've been in a school recently, I haven't seen a single thing that's stupid or bad or unproductive. Almost everything that people do in schools is productive. Because people in education really want kids to succeed. Doug Lamoff says, teaching is incredible because it's one of those jobs where no amount of success is enough for the teacher. So everybody in schools is doing good things. So if you think you can actually improve your school by stopping waste, you're deluding yourself because there's hardly any. So the only way that you can make your schools better is to stop people doing good things to give them time to do even better things. And that's why leadership is so hard. It involves taking things away from people that they feel that are valuable and they are professionally invested in. So when I say to people, you need to spend less time marking, for example, and more time planning lessons, they say things like, are you saying what I'm doing is no good? No, I'm not. I'm just saying it's not as good as some other use you could make of that time. The other thing that I want to say about another kind of myth that is very valuable is sharing good practice. I think sharing good practice is actually a very dangerous idea. I think it's completely overblown. I think if you want to learn how to write a timetable, going to see how another school does it is quite useful. If you want to find out about how to organize a 3-year Key Stage 4, then that's, again, visiting a school and sharing good practice is a good idea. But the danger is that those things have small effects. The thing that has big effects is changing teaching. And in changing teaching, sharing good practice is a fundamental distraction. Because teachers are like magpies. They love picking up shiny little ideas from one classroom, taking it back to their classroom, trying it once, and then moving on to the next shiny idea. We don't need to share good practice. Most teachers have got enough good ideas to last them a lifetime. I've been amazed by the number of times I've talked about some ideas in the classroom, and teachers say to me, oh yeah, I used to do that, it was good. I used to do that, it was good, and I don't do it anymore because something else came along. So if you're serious about helping your schools improve, we must get away from this idea of sharing good practice, at least as far as classroom practice is concerned, and focus more on consolidating and embedding practice for each individual practitioner. So what is needed, I think, to improve the profession is a very simple and very clear set of foci. The first idea is that we get every single teacher to accept 2 commitments. One is that they have to carry on improving their practice as long as they work in schools. The most important question I think we should ask every teacher is, do you need to improve? If they say yes, work with them. If they say no, fire them. But the second commitment is a commitment to focus on the things that makes the most difference to students. So I'm afraid no more brain gym, no more learning styles. Frankly, spending time on those things is self-indulgent. Schooling is a one-shot deal for kids, and if we are wasting time playing around with ideas that have no impact on student achievement, which neither brain gym nor learning styles do, then we are frankly wasting time and wasting the students' chances of success. So we have to focus on the things that make the most difference to student outcomes. What is needed from leaders is a commitment to creating this idea of a continuous improvement of practice, keeping the focus on the things that make the most difference to students, providing the time, space, dispensation, and support for innovation, and supporting risk-taking. So this is both a top-down and a bottom-up message. The top-down bits are, one, if you are working in this school, you will be getting better at something. Non-negotiable. Two, what you work on must have evidence that shows that it's likely to lead to increased learning for your students. But that's where the top-down bit finishes. The bottom-up bit then is each teacher chooses what they're going to work on because they are in the best place to work out what is going to make the biggest difference to their teaching and their students. If we get this right, if we focus on a relentless emphasis on helping every teacher improve their practice slowly but continuously, we will produce unprecedented improvements in student achievement that will prepare them for this impossible, unknowable world for which we are preparing them. So to conclude, what I'd like to suggest is that we need really to embrace this idea that this job of teaching is so difficult that we never get any good at it. The teacher is the single most important variable in the system, but I'm not interested in comparing teachers. I'm not interested in saying that teacher is better than that teacher, because we know that it doesn't work for kids. We know that PE teachers understand this in PE. So what do? They don't compare one student with another student. They compare each student with where they were in terms of their personal best. So for each teacher in the school, what matters is that every month, every year, they achieve a personal best for them. And so to leave you, I'd like to conclude by going back to Samuel Beckett. We will produce a world-class education system if we embrace this idea that we fail every day, but that every day we can come back the next day and fail better. Thank you.